All right. Okay, so our chunk for this past week was chapters 12 through 15, and as we were saying just a second ago, we are now really in the meat of the story. It's, you know, the story in earnest has definitely opened up, and I had said early on that this was like it was a kind of a convergence between a bunch of different genres. That there is some science fiction in here, but there's also some theological reflection and even some kind of philosophical thoughts. And as the narrative is kind of starting to push through somewhere, we've had some, I think, real clear moments of that, especially with Ransom just kind of continuing to wrestle with how alien he is. You know, his entire way of thinking and viewing things, just his fundamental presuppositions are not universal. They think on Malacandra differently than he does. And it's not about +1 or -2. It's sometimes starting from a place completely that feels very different. And as we're kind of pushing through some of the consequences of these chapters, I think Ransom may be dealing with not only completely different ways of seeing things, but whatever assumptions he had that his own way was best, I don't think have survived these chapters. So let's get to it. There's a lot of, you know, some of the kind of philosophical and theological stuff that we're going to be able to chew on for a little bit together. So we are starting on chapter 12. This is Ransom, you know, really kind of living very fully within the culture of the process. He, you know, in many ways just kind of feels a part of them, and that's going to become obviously even more significant later. But by the beginning of chapter 12, he's been here for a good long time, months, I assume. And really kind of feels acclimated to how they live and how they speak, but always kind of finding more things to figure out about how they think, how they sort of approach life. If you recall, we ended chapter 11 with a kind of mysterious comment about one of the young Rasa speaking to an Eldil. And what in the world was that? And so chapter 12 is going to, you know, kind of give Ransom and Huey a chance to kind of talk about what that means. We're really kind of getting into the Malacandran cosmology. Cosmology being the kind of the thinking and studying of how the universe works, not just in a mechanical sense like, you know, constellations and black holes, but sort of like how the pieces fit together in sort of a fundamental way. How, not just how does the world work, why does the world work, or even why is there a world in the first place? All right, so we start talking very early on in chapter 12, and we are, he's still kind of grappling with Maleldil and his role in these things, and still trying to figure out how the three completely separate, not even just races, but like completely separate species. They're all intelligent, but they're all different. And he still can't quite wrap his head around how that works in a practical sense. So within these first couple of pages, anyone have anything they want to point out, ask about? talk about?
Well, in the beginning, at the start of chapter 12, you understand that it's they're like
Three different species, right?
And he's wondering why it is they don't go to war. He's
Yeah.
asking a question about war.
Right. War seems to be kind of first and foremost right now. He's been poking at this for a while about which one is in charge. And every time that gets deflected, like, well, Oyarsa's in charge. Duh. No. Like when the Sorns want you to do something, or who makes the Fifthel Triggy build what they build, and all that just kind of seems to go nowhere to Ransom's mind. He still can't quite wrap his head around it. So then he has to start exploring the concepts of war and conflict, because that's the only framework we understand, right? If you have three different people, let's say three people living in a household, three adults who live in a household, how long before their first conflict?
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's and even if they all get along really well, it's still just a matter of time,
Three different ways of thinking.
There's just three different ways of thinking. I think that's a good way to put it. That even if there's not something like particularly sharp about disagreements, there's still three different ways of thinking, and our problem solving is sort of predicated on like compromise or capitulation. There's a problem, and then it either needs to be my way, your way, or we both give a little to get a little, right?
It doesn't work that way.
Well, but they just don't seem to see it that way. On a fundamental level, these questions don't come up. And it's so, well, how do you fight and argue? How do you settle a dispute? What happens when, the Sorns want food and you do too, and there's not enough for you? And what's the response?
Why would there not be enough?
Why would there not be enough food? And that in and of itself, why would there be scarcity? The fundamental premise of economics is scarcity. No one's ever explained that. That is rule number one. Economics, which isn't just like money, but economics, which comes from the Greek term, the ordering of one's household. It's just like, how do you make all the pieces work together in a system? It could be a business, it could be a family, it could be a society, it could be whatever. How do you make all the pieces fit together? And the fundamental presupposition is scarcity, meaning there are wants, and not all of those wants can be met. We don't have enough stuff, things, in order to satisfy every desire. Therefore, how do you work that out? And that's economics. Whether you share and share alike, or you compete over it, or you try to build more, whatever it is. And this seems to be a fundamentally different, not just approach to life, almost a fundamentally different set of rules. Like, we can't decide together, okay, from now on, there's going to be no scarcity. Like, even if we agreed to that, it wouldn't change the nature of the world. There is still a finite number of resources in the world. Why is this place different? Thoughts? When Ransom asks this, he always kind of keeps coming back, like, well, what happens if okay, there's no scarcity now, but what if you had too many children, or what if there was a bad crop, or whatever? And Huey kind of keeps deflecting this as though it's a sort of a nonsense question about, what does blue smell like? Or have you ever heard the sound of green? How does he keep answering this?
Well, one of the things you mentioned, having too many children. Well, why would you have too many children?
Right.
And then they get on to,
Sure. So there's kind of a, well, why would you do
Can you
that?
hear it?
I can't make it out.
Are we not loud enough?
I have to adjust the sound here
Okay,
for Tom. Sometimes I have to put it up, sometimes down because of his earphones.
sure.
We're okay. Thank you.
So yeah, some of it is just kind of a, well, duh, why would you do that? Kind of like, well, why would you create a problem for yourself? But pushing past that, because sometimes Ransom gets annoyed, like, okay, well, just say for the sake of argument you did. He always answers that. So there's kind of a final answer that always, no matter how hard Ransom pushes, eventually he's going to hit a brick wall of,
The Sorns may know.
not quite. I mean, that's true that the Sorns are kind of the philosophers. But it wasn't just a matter of, well, I don't know the answer. It's more, when he says the Sorns would know, it's more like, I just told you the answer, but I can't really explain it any better than I did. So the kind of fundamental answer always goes back to either Oyarsa or Malelville.
Yeah, Malala makes the decision.
You know, well, what would happen if you didn't have enough food? Well, Malelville would give us enough food. Well, what would happen if? Well, that wouldn't happen because. And, you know, that's still not a satisfying answer to Ransom because he wants to understand how they know that, why that's the case, what Malelville does. And I think that's where Hillary kind of pushes it to the Sorns, like, that's the sort of thing they know. But ultimately, that's the answer, that Malelville wills it. There's going to be enough food for what we need. That's all there is to it. Now, the same, and that in essence seems to answer a bunch of questions, but in a secondary fashion. If you have what you need, always, without doubt or question, then why would the three different species compete and argue with each other?
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. So
I
Yes.
kind of took that whole part as our faith. As our faith in God. It's their faith that He's going to provide. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's what came to me as I was reading that.
yes, and you're right. So, you know, they have a religious faith that is all pervasive. It seems relatively simple, and to Ransom maybe simplistic. Like, that's an easy answer, but I want to get like the real tough answers. But there's something about it that's fundamentally true, that their very straightforward, simple answers are accurate. There is there's no evidence that he can figure out that there are these conflicts, there are these wars, there are these famines or competition between the three species. He sees no evidence, not only in what they say and you know, their art or whatever. They don't even have the words for it. He has to invent these roundabout ways of asking that they still don't completely get. And I just think that's something that's, you know, it's as the world continues to unfold, this is what he's dealing with. And this is part of the reason, as this becomes more and more evident, he becomes more and more ashamed. He becomes ashamed of who he is in the world that he comes from. So I want to, I do want to toss something out in case anyone starts sort of leaning in this, in the direction of wonder. This is not kumbaya. And this is not, you know, if we could only, you know, do communism the right way. This is zero to do with any of that. What I'm going to suggest, and what we'll see as the book continues to unfold, this is a fundamentally different, the rules of the world are different. The question is going to be why, and that's what we don't know yet. But this isn't anything that Earth could do if we were just smarter or more cooperative or whatever. This is a fundamentally different set of rules.
Different nature of things.
It is a different nature of things. It's a great way to put it. A different nature. So there is a really beautiful little paragraph here, and it's early on in 12. And I just want to make sure that we think about it. This is where Ransom and Huey they're not really arguing, but they're trying to help each other understand this concept of desire and want and longing and the unfulfilled expectation, or why would you want a thing again if you've already had it? That's where you start to accrue stuff, and if you don't get it, you get unhappy, and where the unhappiness comes from, and all that. And Huey says this: a pleasure is full grown only when it is remembered. You are speaking, man, of the pleasure as if it were one thing and the memory was another. It's all one thing. The Saroni could say it better than I could now, not better than I could say it in a poem. What you call remembering is the last part of the pleasure, as the craw is to the last of a poem. When you and I met, the meeting was over very shortly. It was nothing. Now it is growing something as we remember it. But still, we know very little about it. What will it be when I remember it as I lay down to die? What makes in me all the days till then? That is the real meaning. The other is only the beginning of it. You say you have poets in this world.
78.
This.
No, 74.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm about 2/3 of the way down 74.
Oh. Yeah, I found it.
All right, so how does that strike you?
Difference in outlook.
Difference in outlook?
This is almost, I can't get the word out, perfection of friendship needs to describe.
A perfection of friendship? Yep. What does it mean to you for an event and the memory of that event to actually be the same thing? They're not separate issues.
Because they are separate issues.
Why?
I don't know. That's half the difference in the species, I guess.
Okay.
Because there is a difference between the actual, when you are living a thing,
Right.
and then later when you think about it.
Okay.
Time, the passage of time can color it one way or another.
That's true. The passage of time colors a lot of, an event happens in the present and is then in our past. And so our experience of that event that endures is not the event itself. It's our memory, which is always an interpretation. It's not the actual event.
The perception can change it.
Perception can change over time. Maybe something that you thought was good, and the more you think about it, or as things go on and you see all the repercussions, you're just like, oh, that was bad, or vice versa.
And it can be entirely different from your perspective than someone else who.
That's what, yeah, like two people, like the meeting of two people. One person said, well, that went great. The other person said, oh boy, what a lousy time. I never want to see that person again. But let me suggest that the understanding, the clarity of this may be unique to the Mitochondrial way of life. But I think as an understanding of nature itself, this premise is still true. The pleasure of something is not just in its moment, but it's also in its anticipation, and it's also in its memory.
That's true.
In the same sense that like sight and smell enhance your ability to taste, like a great meal, the way it looks, but even more so the way that it smells affects its taste. The anticipation of that, the pleasurable event, and then how it continues on your memory and what it does to you. I'm leading a class right now for some of the older Boy Scouts, God in Church. And so you have this book and a curriculum, and it's supposed to start off with this concept of being on a journey. You're going to be on a journey with Jesus, and you're going to keep these notes, and you're going to read and do things, and then you're going to act like you're on a trip and make postcards to people, telling what you learned and what you experienced. And so as I'm laying out the theme, this journey and travel theme, I'm asking them about different trips they've taken and vacations or, scout camps or whatever. And we're talking about what made them memorable. And they're talking about stuff that happened. This exciting thing happened, this fun thing happened. I saw this cool thing, whatever it was. We start talking about the best trips aren't just fun when you go on them, but they sort of change you. They impact you after you come back home. And this is something that I think Huey is trying to get Ransom to understand in a very overt way. That it's true for him too. It's just perhaps humanity or on earth, we've stopped thinking about it, but it doesn't mean it's not true. The memory of something becomes directly connected with the pleasure of the experience itself. C.S. Lewis, somewhere completely different, will write, some pleasures are never truly finished or never truly complete until they're shared with someone else. Telling someone about the event, getting someone to go to the same restaurant you went to, trying to get somebody to watch a movie that you enjoyed. Your pleasure then kind of finds a sense of completeness or enhancement at least, not because you did it again, but because someone else did it. Yeah. We don't think about it very often, but it's true.
That's why we take pictures.
We do take pictures to remind ourselves and to show other people, and by their joy, we feel joy. Now, how does this relate to what Ransom and Huey are talking about scarcity and stuff like that? It comes in kind of a specific moment. Because he's talking about love. And some of it's about reproduction. And, Ransom's kind of sort of very gently feeling around like, are those two related for you guys? And Huey's like, well, of course they are, obviously. But it's this great culmination that you wait a lifetime for, and it's an event, and then it's complete, or at least the event is complete. And Ransom can't wrap his head around like, oh, so it's like a one-time thing and then never again? Like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's no such thing as a one-time thing and never again. By thinking about it, by the way it shapes me, by my memory of it, it's always a part of me. So that's why these creatures maybe don't have to feel that nagging sense of I need more or I want it again, because they are mindful that the pleasure of a pleasurable event is never fully ceased. It's always there. Now, we mentioned it before, maybe very briefly, but we start getting a little more usage of a particular term. Ransom, just for the life of him, cannot figure out a way to communicate evil or bad or wicked or wrong even. So the best he can come up with is the term what? Bent. And so, what would happen? Somebody wrote a bent poem And he's like, well, then no one would read it. And he keeps asking him about, okay, so if the expectation is an understanding, let's call it straight or level or flat, for something to take an unexpected curve in an unexpected direction would be this concept of being bent. So Ransom tries to apply it in a bunch of different ways. Well, what about being bent in your desire for love? What about being bent in your want for food? What about blah, blah, blah? But even that, does that really make a good connection with joy?
No, he says there are no bent horses.
Right. And the closest thing just sort of sounds like a very mild case of maybe, I don't know if we want to say mental illness, but just, you know, just sort of this, nothing wicked, nothing evil, nothing wrong, but just more like there's a little short circuit in a brain where someone starts eating stuff that's not food. Like that seems to be about as bad as things ever get. It's just being, you know, maybe slightly off center. All right, so can you explain some about the relationship between the hrasa and the hanakra?
Well, Ransom talks about the malleable is let in the hanakra.
Right, right. Now, I think Ransom's trying to make a case for understanding evil again. The hanakra, this terrifying, carnivorous, I guess, I have kind of a cross between a shark and an alligator in my mind. So what's Huey's response to that? Malevolent has allowed this terrible thing to exist.
Makes it sound like an enemy, but also a love.
Right. And I would say, not just an enemy and a loved one, I would say even enemy doesn't come up in this. I would say the better way, because I would think they have no concept of enemy. Adversary, opponent,
Different.
is definitely different. Like I want to beat him. I want to kill him, and he wants to kill me. But it's not out of hatred. It's a challenge. It is of the nature of the nakra to eat and consume others. It's not out of malice. It's a carnivore. It's a predator. You know, when an animal hurts or kills someone, do we put that animal on trial? Well, no, because it's simply their nature. They're not bad or mean. Now that doesn't mean that, you know, this like you know, the bear that wanders into the campsite gets a taste for human food and then kills a camper. What typically happens to that bear? They hunt the bear and kill the bear. Because
They're destroyed.
it's just too dangerous. But even that is ostensibly not a, well, you mean bad bear, I hate you. So much as it is, we have to protect other people, and for your own good, you can't kill any humans, and we gotta stop that. So there's this, I think, a purity in the adversarial quality between the hrasa and the nakra. It even says like we kind of fear him and we love him. Can we wrap our heads around that?
That's not the kind of attitude that most humans would have. Hard to suggest.
Sure.
What makes you think that that's a mystery? I don't know why, but the thought is coming to me. I don't know exactly what year it was, but someone killed the peasants in Russia because they went over into their land.
Yes, right. The Great Purge.
Horrible. It was something, I don't think we Western world really understood what's going on.
No, tens of millions, maybe
Yeah,
as many as
literally.
50 million.
Yeah, I saw films
Right.
that it horrified me.
Sure.
So, people.
Well, and this is strangely enough, this book is kind of contemporary with those historical events. This is a different science fiction work, and you may or may not have ever come across it, but an author named Orson Scott Card, and his most famous book is called Ender's Game, and it's about this character named Ender. But the real backdrop is a war between Earth and an alien species, and there seems to be kind of a us or them ultimatum about it. And they're kind of insect-like, and they're so incredibly foreign, even communication seems impossible, but they're going to kill us. And so embedded within some of the strategy, the kind of the wisest people on the earth side are teaching this philosophy of the only way to truly beat an enemy is to know them so well that you begin to love them. And there is just it's kind of this deep metaphysical truth of humanity that the more we know someone, it's almost impossible to not love them at some level. The more deeply, intimately, an opponent, an adversary, even an enemy, the more you find out about someone, the less they're a caricature, the less they're two-dimensional. You start seeing some real humanity and having some sort of connection. You start seeing some kind of commonality, even if it's little things. And even if it doesn't change your mind about needing to beat them. But suddenly they're not just inhuman beasts, but it is another person. Now the Nakra is, it's not a person, it's a beast, but there's that kind of really interesting, we're all connected. You're trying to kill me and I'm trying to kill you, but it's nothing personal, right? Both, not just the thrill of a hunt, but this is clearly like a lifetime achievement. To be the one who slays the Nakra is kind of the crowning achievement of one's life, because apparently it's so hard and difficult to do. It's so rare. And very few ever have that chance, let alone succeed. It's funny that this section reminds me of another genre of both literature and even some movies, but the concept of the protagonist going native, like you're within some undeveloped country and you start adopting their practices, and suddenly the protagonist from a more developed or civilized place becomes, I'm like them now, and that's been repeated in a variety of different circumstances. And I think there's an element of this, but it would be so easy again to assume that Ransom is somehow becoming less in order to be like them. That he's smart, he's civilized, he's intelligent, he is evolved. And so for him to be on a hunt against a creature and in a boat throwing a spear sounds very primitive and very savage. But the more we learn about this society and this world, who are the savages?
We are humans.
We are. We're the savages. And there's this kind of growing sense of shame, I would say. All right, so they're now out in the boats and they're out hunting. He's been given a position of being with Quinn and Huey, and this is, this is a big deal. This, in a once in a lifetime event for him to have this position, this is like as much as they can probably honor him. And what's his take on it?
Only feels like he's got to show his species here.
Yeah, first of all, I'm the only man, so I need to kind of represent here. I don't want to be a dummy and look like a fool. I want to, I'm the only one here, so I've got to kind of do my best. As the hunt is actually going on, what are his feelings about himself and the hunt?
What was the question?
So as they're actually out in the boats and they're trying to chase down this Nakra, what's Ransom? What are his feelings about himself and this hunt? We've already said he doesn't want to embarrass himself because he's the only man they've ever seen. But what else?
He's honored that they've included him as an active participant.
Yes.
It makes him feel more like he's part of their community.
Yes, he's never felt closer. There's a moment in there, and he's like he's one of them. He even starts kind of fantasizing, like, what if I do it? And it starts to not be a crazy thought. And he's no, Olympic athlete or anything. He's an academic and somewhat stringy, but whether it's the months of being on Malacandra that have affected him, whether it's the being there together with these friends who have adopted him, and just the whole circumstances. But he's, what if I become man, not Punts, going down across a history as the one and only man to ever kill him? He's into it. He is flat into it. And just at kind of we're about to get to the place where we think the Nakra is, what happens?
An El Deal arrives.
El Deal. And for the first time, Ransom can figure out something is there. What tips him off? What's different than the first time?
I think he heard the voice, didn't he?
A voice this time. This time it's not just maybe this is a quaint Rasa superstition. He hears the voice. He can't see it. He can tell there's something funny about the light, but he hears the voice. And what does the voice say?
He was supposed to go to
Yarsa.
Yes, the man must go to Co Yarsa.
Okay. I knew he was supposed to go someplace.
Yes. The man must go to Oyarsa. Not this. So in the middle of a once in a lifetime hunt, right when they're about to get in the thick of things, the man must go.
And or there'd be trouble for them.
Well, I'm not sure that even comes up yet. I just think it was, no, this is what needs to happen. And Ransom is basically saying, okay, in a minute. But what's the attitude of Quinn and Hioi to being told by the El Deal that the hunt has to conclude?
It says if they find him anywhere else, there will be evil.
Okay.
And they tell him that he really should go. That when Adela speaks, you immediately do what they ask.
Yeah, they basically they're done. They're, and it's kind of Ransom talking them back into it almost. But they're like, no, you don't understand. It's not what I like or what I want. We've been told you got to go to Oyarsa. That's what needs to happen. And what does Ransom feel in that moment? The hunt is called off.
Disappointment.
Disappointment, but I think even something a little sharper than that.
Relief.
The courage to go on.
Courage, resentment. I'm going to say the sharpest emotion he has early on is shame and sorrow. He wants to apologize, and he doesn't know how to do that because Quinn and Hioi there's nothing to apologize for. You've not done something, you have to go to Oyarsa. That's the way it is. you know, the people that you think should be the most upset. My once in a lifetime experience. They're not upset in the least. It is what it is. The LDL is close, you have to go to a Yarsa, you got to go to a Yarsa. But it's Ransom who feels very responsible, he feels guilty, he feels sad. He's trying to convey this, but it doesn't quite make any sense.
See, the messenger also says, people, for a lack of better word, of your own kind, of Ransom's own kind, are looking for him. And that's why he needs to go to Oyarsa, sorry.
Right. So who's looking for him?
It's Weston and what's his name?
Yeah, Weston and Devon, that's right.
And it says very specifically, they are bent. So that means they're
The best that Ransom can try to explain to Quinn and Healy, because I think he feels the need to try to explain this. Not that they seem to need an explanation, but he's trying to get them to understand that these men are bent. And if they find him, something bad would happen. And he doesn't mean to him, he means to them. And I think most of us understand that sentiment where, you know, especially, you know, children, there's nothing worse than death. Well, I think the older you get and the more connected you are to others, by and large, most of us would say there are things worse than death. And being the cause of suffering of someone else, especially those who we love.
right.
We would far prefer our own death than to harm or cause it in somebody that we care about. And so so Ransom understands the stakes. He's trying to get them to understand, although I'm not sure they need to understand. They are obedient simply because
They're obedient to their higher power.
in their very nature they are. There's not really a decision to be made. And there's not a sense of regret or sorrow because it is what it is. Now, we get this kind of, you know, Ransom still just trying to explain, and I think this is coming out of a sense of feeling so bad, feeling so guilty and responsible. He tries to sort of explain, you know, what would be so dangerous, and then here comes the nutcracker. And so what happens in this climax event?
He falls out of the boat into the water. And then jumps on the back of him and kills him.
Yeah, so it's this pretty exciting little moment that kind of comes out of nowhere, and Ransom really is in the thick of it. And he acquits himself well, but he is about to be killed by this supremely dangerous creature. And then right when he's about to die, Kilway to the rescue with jumping on top of the creature and getting it to look up, throwing the spear down its only vulnerable spot in its mouth, and then all three of them and the tumbling and the rushing and everything else, and they do it. And there, in the moment of a lifetime culmination of triumph, Joy is a Nakra hunt, the killer of a Nakra, which he has hoped for and prepared for and waited for all his life. And a split second later, has it ended.
He gets shot.
Yeah. At the moment of triumph, Joy is shot and killed. Weston and Devine have caught up. And though they had no idea they were around, well, that doesn't matter when one of them has a rifle. They took aim, they shot him, and in this moment of triumph, Joy is killed. And I thought it was very poignant. And Ransom trying to come up with words of apology or sorrow and not knowing even what to say. Huey not understanding what was happening. No concept of a rifle, of a bullet,
It's bad.
a big shot. And Huey's dying gift to Ransom.
Huh?
Huey's dying gift to Ransom. He proclaims Ransom a man, not for putts.
This is dumb.
And maybe the highest acclaim, and even answering the sort of the daydream that Ransom had. And he dies with the two of them with such a sense of brotherhood. All right, so at the death of Huey, Ransom tries to help Quinn, be safe, not get killed. And then now they know he has no choice. Even the delay of going after the Nakra has resulted in something tragic to him. So he's just going to make straight. So off he goes. All right, so we've got a journey now. How did the journey, what do you remember from that? This is mostly chapter 14, just kind of describing him going from the hunt with the Harasa as he's journeying on, following these directions he's been given. So what happens from that?
Has to cross the veranda with the home of the storms.
Mm-hmm.
And puzzles over what Oyarsa
Right, still trying to figure that one out.
feels fear, but a confidence in himself.
Yeah, the directions are very simple, but they seem straightforward, as though it's working. How do things change in his environment?
Comes in sunshine.
The air was different.
What's different about the air?
He started having trouble breathing.
Yeah, the atmosphere gets thinner. Is he going down or is he going up? Or is he staying the same? He's going up, up. And it's getting colder and colder. It's now starting to feel more like an Arctic cold, not just a blustery cold. And even the air is getting very difficult to breathe. And he's going higher and higher, as though, maybe climbing a peak of a mountain. We could understand that, going higher up a mountain, it gets colder and the air gets thinner. But he starts understanding something very unexpected about Mitochondria and its geography. The higher he goes, what does he notice about where he was, the Handramit?
It's darker and it's colder.
It's darker and it's colder where he's going.
It's more level.
So this is, again, he's trying to piece together stuff that it's hard for him to understand.
And the air is thinner.
The air is thinner. So he starts understanding that where he was actually the valley. But it wasn't just a valley like in between mountains. It was actually beneath the surface itself. He's not climbing to a mountain peak. He realizes that where he's going is actually another surface altogether. That where he was more like cracks and fissures in the surface. And as he's getting closer to a second surface, maybe the outer surface of this planet, it's getting cold and the air is getting very thin. This is another one of those little clues for those who remember their school age astronomy. There is a planet in our solar system known, at least historically, for what some astronomers refer to as a system of canals or cracks on the surface. So he's describing what we kind of figured was the planet. We got used to it where he was and where the ship landed, all this time with Harasa and fishing and everything else. But that actually was more like a crack or fissure in the real surface, and he's approaching the real surface. So anyway, we can set that aside for later. He finally does make it, at least to a stopping place. There's a cave, there's warmth, there's light, and just when he thinks he can go no further, it is the home of what? A storm. The creatures he has been fearing since the first time their name came up, and the purpose that somehow Divine and Weston were going to give him over to one. And he meets his very first one and is welcomed into this storm's home. Audrey. That's how I'm pronouncing it, for good or for bad.
And isn't that the person or the place he was told to go?
No. He is to head to Meldalorn to meet Oyarsa.
Well, right, but wasn't it mentioned in the directions that there would be?
Stop here, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so he is supposed to be here, but this is not the end of the journey.
Right.
The description of that storm
Yes.
was absolutely weird.
Yep, weird. What are some things you remember about the description of the storm?
Very long legs,
Long legs,
wedge-shaped buttocks,
wedge-shaped buttocks. Think
protruding
of
breasts,
that one.
covered all over with something like feathers.
Yeah. And it's got this very elongated, too close to human for comfort face.
Mhm.
Seemed too small.
Yeah, it's human-like, but it's off in a way that's very unsettling.
Yeah.
Well,
More grotesque than horrible.
well, yeah. So if he had thought before about this thing was like a giant or a troll, now it doesn't seem like that. But he still calls it grotesque, but not but this is like more grotesque, more like in the architectural sense.
Mhm.
Strangely unsettling, not evil or bad, not devastatingly scary.
One of the funny little things that they are in architecture sometimes, I can't get the name. They are grotesque.
Like gargoyles?
Yes.
Yes. So a gargoyle, now I think it's all gargoyles are grotesque, but not all grotesques are gargoyles, I think. Is that right? So a grotesque would be like a carved figure of something built into the architecture, especially along the roof line. And a gargoyle was one of those, but it had kind of very specific function. So, is it the water that makes it gargoyle? So right. That's right. So it's kind of a guttering system to get the water away off the roof line from hitting the foundation. So anyway, how might we describe the personality of Audrey? He's been terrified of these things.
No.
Is Audrey terrified?
No.
Offers them hospitality.
Yeah, what's one of the first things that he offers Ransom?
Food and drink.
He does offer food and drink. What else?
Oxygen.
He gives him oxygen. Here, smell this cup. And there's a cup attached to what looks like a vine or something like that. But basically, and this helps Ransom feel better. And he's going to say, oh, it's oxygen, although it's just an English word. It's not going to be give it all to Audrey. But like from the beginning, there is a technological understanding from the Sorns that would, I think, answer any questions of this being a primitive society. So he is very hospitable. He does seem kind of solemn, but not in a threatening way at all. So what are some things that we learn from his conversation, from Ransom's conversation with Audrey?
There must be some sort of shepherds taking care of animals from which they make a cheese-like substance.
Right. Remember one of the first creatures that he meets after he runs off from the ship was the thing that looks sort of like a weird giraffe eating the tops of the leaves of the trees. I'm assuming that's the same thing.
Didn't think about that, yeah.
And so that kind of pleases Ransom, that one of his first impressions of the Sorns from afar off was like a cyclops. And then he starts remembering about the story of the cyclops in the Odyssey and the shepherd. And anyway, so there's a weird familiarity about this that he actually kind of likes. What else do we learn?
Movement, and smells, and sound, and sights.
Yeah, there's a little section there on page 94 that where he is, the Sorn is trying to explain to Ransom the concept of the LDA. And there's this section about movement, and it's very philosophical, and it might be difficult to put the pieces together.
That which moves maybe in two places at once.
If it moves fast enough, sure, which is really a matter of perception. The interesting thing about this, whether or not we were catching all of the pieces, he's basically explaining sort of the principles of matter. And he's talking about movement and almost speed in a sense that are limited by our perceptions, not by their reality. Meaning, can a thing move so fast that you can't see it? Yes, we know that.
Yeah.
But does it mean that thing doesn't exist because we can't see it? Well, no, of course not. There's lots of things that are too small or too fast or whatever that we can't perceive, but doesn't mean they're not there. And so, in what sounds like almost a childish way to describe it, and some of this might just be the language barrier, there's this somewhat philosophical understanding about things that move, and the movement and how fast it moves and being able to perceive it, and many things the same. Something being in the two places at once, and what if something could move fast enough?
You're right.
So what happens according to Einsteinian physics about the matter about the mass of an object as it approaches the speed of light?
It flattens.
Hmm?
It flattens.
Flattens. So remember your high school physics. E equals mc squared, which means there's a fundamental relationship between energy and mass and the speed of light. As objects will increase their mass as they approach the speed of light. And that's one of the reasons why in Einsteinian physics, you can't ever go as fast as light or break that is like a barrier, because you would
Implode.
well, no, you would basically contain all the mass of the universe. So you can only approach the speed of light like an asymptote, where it gets close but it never reaches it. Because as your own mass increased, if you were to actually hit that, by that reciprocal relationship, you would have to contain all the mass in the universe. Anyway, it gets a little heady. But the funny thing is, the somewhat simplistic definition given by the Sorn kind of fits with, at least at that time, current understandings of physics.
Well, it seems to me that what it's going into is that you're talking about the body and the cell
Yes,
with life.
correct.
So it's. And
That's
this is
right.
why- And this is why it would be like seeing just something out of the corner of your eye.
Sure. Now, if something was moving so fast that it could be everywhere at once, there is a philosophical term, a technical term for that, omnipresence.
Which is, you know, who is.
And theologically, we ascribe omnipresence to whom?
Right.
Okay. Part of the nature, the divine nature of God is omnipresence. Omnipotence means all powerful. Omnipresence means always present, everywhere. No place, the psalmist writes, that I could go to escape you. The highest mountain, the deepest part of the sea. The concept of, God being everywhere. I had we talked about this, I think, in a different discussion. My very oddball systematic theology professor who said, I don't like calling God timeless, I like calling God timeful. Timeless sounds like God lacks something and God lacks nothing. Timeful in the sense of all of time incorporated within God, because God is actually bigger than time. He's not outside of time, as though time were something separated, potentially larger than God. But if God is, over and above all things, even time that to us seems infinite is smaller and contained within his presence. So we are getting, a little more cosmology, a little more theology here. And these LDL are a part of that. These spiritual beings, let's just leave it at that for now. And they seem to be kind of in different classes. Oyarsa is an LDL of sorts. Then again, so was the LDL that told Huey that Ransom had to go to see Oyarsa. So was the LDL that Ransom heard a child talking to. So like just kind of a spiritual realm of spiritual beings. And there's going to be more to learn about that, but I think this is what's getting unpacked. All right, so what are some of the last things we learned from Audrey? Where it is confirmed, where is Ransom from? What planet is he from?
Alcandra.
Volcandra. And how does Audrey know that?
Oh, what Ransom is just now giving us the idea of Eldor. An explanation is just not given to him. And then called spiritual, strange creature. That's because Ransom doesn't understand. He knows he's from a place.
Right.
Where there's no recognition.
That's right. I think you are from the silent planet because you know nothing of Eldor. You can't see them, you can't speak to them. That makes sense. Interesting enough, earlier on, Audrey also has like physical reasons for assuming Ransom is from the silent planet based off of astronomical knowledge. You're the sort of creature who would fit being in the presence of the size of the planet and its distance from the sun. It makes sense for you to be roughly the shape that you are. And again, that's a little bit, Audrey understands astrophysics. And he also understands theology. The fact that so here's kind of our next clue about the nature of Oyarsa. Oyarsa is Eldil, is a spiritual being, is not Maleldil, who is the spiritual being above all. What is Oyarsa then, as far as the Eldil is concerned? Not over and above everything, but responsible in a sense for Malacandra itself. Every planet has an Oyarsa. And we get this little interaction with Ransom saying, well, do they talk to each other? And how does that work? And Audrey is still like, you don't quite understand. It's not a physical place that one is standing on one planet and one's standing on another planet. They're actually always together. And yet we also perceive them within their own planets. And this is going to take more understanding, but these Oyarsa are in communication except for one. There's one planet which does not communicate. So we call it Volcandra, the silent planet. And Ransom says, well, we don't have an Oyarsa online. And so what does that tell Audrey?
Proves he's from Falcon.
That proves that you are from Tholkandra, the silent things. He says, hey, you want to see it? And so with a way that does not look like an earthly telescope, he's actually able to show Ransom an image of a planet. He's kind of hopeful that he's wrong. But as he figures it out, it's actually an inverted. Anyone ever see the like a science experiment demonstration of the camera obscura effect?
Where things are flipped.
That's right, things are flipped. So the earliest cameras, it was like a dark box and a pinhole. Light comes through and it shines the image through the pinhole on the back wall, but the image is always upside down. And those were the first cameras. And even modern cameras operate in that fashion. It's just we've added mirrors to turn them right side up.
Why do I feel when I'm reading this, the elders angelic beings? Why? I don't know how I think that, but I do. Same again. I always, when I read this, they'll seem to be angelic beings.
Well,
Okay.
what are angelic beings other than these spiritual beings that encompass a spiritual,
Realm.
say, realm or dimension that we are unaware of? So, food for thought. Okay, so anything else on these chapters?
There was an interesting thing at the beginning of Ransom's journey where he made a decision to continue the journey no matter what happened, because he said something to the effect that, you know, when I started thinking about things in the meantime, they didn't go so well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he commits himself. I am going to finish this journey no matter how I feel.
Right. And so that's just noteworthy, or you would like to understand more?
It was just an observation that I thought was interesting, because midway in the journey, he did sort of think, well, maybe not, but he remembered to continue with his resolution.
Well, that's right. And I think this is his time on Malacandra and with the Harasa paying some dividends, where he is choosing obedience as the Harasa do without thinking. Because when he has wrestled and thought and tried to weigh his options, it's not gone well.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is trying, if only maybe to sort of respect and honor the death of his friend.
Yeah.
He wants to act the way his friend would have him act, which is obey the word of the LDL and finish what you've been told to do. So already, not only is he kind of the way he sees and thinks expanding because of meeting the Rasa, but he's also choosing to act now in a way that is more reflective. He is going native. He's acting more like a Malacandran than an Earthling by being obedient in this fashion.
And the thing that is, it's interesting, I felt from the very beginning, he's been protected. He's been protected from all the name of those two guys.
For sure, Weston and Divine,
Yeah,
you know,
he's been protected.
yeah, weren't there plenty of opportunities for them to shoot him, find him, whatever, and yet things have progressed in this very particular fashion.
Like he's meant to discover these things. He's meant to meet these creatures.
Yeah.
He's meant to learn these things. Where the other two, I keep forgetting their names.
Weston and Divine?
Yeah,
Yes.
they don't learn anything. They don't know.
For sure.
They know wiser than they came.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So, are we good?
Yeah.
All right, let's figure out what we're going to read. We're going to start on chapter 16. Where would you like to go? There are only 22 chapters. So we're to the point where we're gonna either do 2 more classes or 3 more classes, I would assume. But I don't see a reason we would break it into 4 pieces.
There's also a postscript, which is the equivalent of another chapter.
Yeah, okay. All right, fair enough.
Divide it roughly in half.
Or is that too much?
There we go.
So,
This is really, definitely not light reading. This is something that, these were just, casual things.
sure, what if we did 16, 17, 18?
Yeah.
That sound
Do
good?
what
16, 17, 18.
for next time?
Yep,
Okay,
And we are meeting next week. You were talking about scheduling when I signed on.
yes. Yeah, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't.
Okay. I
Yep.
thought maybe you were talking about some,
No, just the busyness of summer. We're talking about how our summers are going and if we were taking a family trip or not, and I was just trying to explain that it's already busy.
okay. So
Okay.
much for time off, huh?
So we good?
Good.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Love you.
Bye.